for a start.
I think this is moved through actually. I think you're good to go.
Hi guys.
Now we're going to go come back this way anyway, because we
Yep.
just that one's clear, that first chamber. We're going to head around that way. I'm going to give you a bit of background info on the artist here and the carvings for the first couple of chambers, and then it's self-guided after that. Then you guys wander through them at your own pace. Come on through. I think we're good to go. There we go. That's the original mine level down there, guys. It's over 100-year old. So we're up in the sandstone at the moment. There's no opal up in the sandstone here. It's all been dug out just to do carvings. Down there is the opal level. It's clay level underneath the sandstone. And Ron Cannon, our artist, he's owned the mine for over 35 years, done a lot of work down there himself. Always thought the old timers would have missed a bit back in the early days. Unfortunately for Ron, they didn't leave much behind. Come on through, boy. This was the first chamber that Ron ever carved. Now this all started back around 23 years ago. So back in '97, Ron hand cut those steps all the way from the surface down past this area to the opal level. He wanted to do a walk down tourism line where he could invite people down. So he did that on a bet with one of his mates. It took him 6 months and he won $100 in the end. That wasn't the best bet he'd ever done. Once he completed them, he put a sign and a bell up top. He used to invite people down, do a little tour around the mine. While he was waiting on someone turning up one day, he got bored, got his butter knife out, carved that welcome sign there in the doorway. That's the first one he's ever done down here. The two chains either side of the doorway there came next. Now he's had no formal lessons, no art classes or anything like that. It's all self-taught. We start you in this direction to give you an idea of his learning curve. So this was the first chamber, his humble beginnings, and he just got better and better as he went along. You'll see these little Where's Wally's on the wall down there, but that's to keep the kids occupied. Because the sandstone's quite soft, we ask everyone if they mind not touching the sandstone itself, like the carvings themselves. The sandstone, you're not going to worry about it, but what it tends to do is powder away as it dries, so you can wear away the carvings eventually. Ron the artist, painted those little Wallies all the way through the carvings in sneaky places. We tell the kids if they count them up and get the right number, we give them a good prize.
Can't be a kid.
That's number one, by the way, guys, okay? And there's only one in this chamber. Now, he didn't do much carving through this area. We actually, once we get you started, this is like a big circle. You can't get lost. There's a lot of twists, turns, chambers and themed areas, but it's like everywhere I go, you end up back in the gift shop again, don't you? So you can't get lost. But you can still continue around. So if you want to come back through, that's fine.
Okay, great.
And he didn't do a lot of carving through here. There's quite a few fault lines. The pieces tend to break away, and as they dry out. What the original idea for this was, he was driving through here, tunneling through to break through to this old mine shaft. So there's an old timer's mine shaft there. What he done is that increased his airflow. We don't pump the air down here. This is all natural airflow. Once you've got open shafts and tunneling, it's just like a cave system, it just replenishes all the time. Now there's no Wallies in this chamber. We had one next to Marge Simpson, but he got really dusty and hard to see, so we don't count that one. Just in case you were looking. Now Ron was getting better as he went along here. These two guys, Atlas and Hercules, he estimates it took him about 10 hours each to do those, and that was around about 14 years ago. All he did was just chop the rough shape out of the wall there with a little hand pick. Knife and fork is all he's used. You can still see the fork marks around there. Now Ron's done over 800 carvings over 22 years. We've actually lost track of them all. And all he's used for the whole carvings is knife and fork. Now being English, the old bone handled butter knife, that's his favourite. Champion steel's the best, he reckons. And a leather work glove in the early days, just to smooth them off. He found in later years steel wool was a lot faster and a lot easier.
Okay.
Now it took about 8 years to do the first two chambers that we've just been in. There was only a muck around in the early days. Ron would go mining in the morning, come up in the afternoon, have a bit of a play. It was only a hobby back then. After that, more people started to come down. He wanted to see more and more carvings all the time. So he started through in that direction there, guys. He went pretty much full time for the next 14 years. Now,
Does he still own this place?
He still owns it. He was here about 4 days ago, fixing some of the carvings up and that. Ron's actually turned 80 now.
Wow.
Well, next month he'll turn 80. Still super fit.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know he was nearly 80. 18 months ago, he was still running up those steps 2 at a time. It was disgusting. Yeah. Anyway, guys, we'll leave you here and let you wander on through. But the Black Hand part of the name, a lot of people want to know about the secret societies and stuff like that. It's only just an old sign up top in the junction of the road. Been around for about 80 years, an old piece of tin, cut in the shape of a hand, obviously painted black. Has Castlereagh Highway and some of the various opal fields in the area written on there. And the mine being so close to it, always been known as the Black Hand Mine.
Okay.
It's a bit boring in the end, wasn't
Yeah.
it? All right, folks, we'll leave you here. Let you wander on through. Quite a lot of twists, turns, chambers and themed areas. Like I said, big circle back to the showroom again. You can grab a couple there and you can still keep coming through again. It's not a stop start.
Okay.
All right,
Okay,
great
great.
job.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys a bit later on.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Money, tourism, and lighting.
Oh yeah, but how clever is this? This is so clever.
Yeah, guys, this section from here is just not going to feel like I can actually be on this line. There's a good test drive to come up. The two theatres are both playing, they're both playing the same thing. So, of course, outline to us.
Sorry.
You alright? Okay.
They've got us in pretty tight, haven't they?
Yeah.
I could put those big by. I can move it over. I think you should. Yeah, I think I'll do too. We've done that with
You wouldn't even know what it was in there. So it's just like you get some digging, might see a little bit of hot shining like that. So this bit, shows how big it is inside. It just reflects the light through it. So that gives you an idea how big that can be.
G'day everyone, my name's Peter. I've been in Lightning Ridge now for about 46 years. I reckon I've probably worked for about 36 underground. Anything to do with opal mining, I've had a go at. Open cutting, top dirt, underground, the lot. Now, my father first came up here when I was about 3 years old. He kept coming up. He went home one year and Mum said, look, either we go to Lightning Ridge for good or we forget it. The old man couldn't forget it. We came up permanently when I was 6. I don't think you could ask for a better place to grow up as a kid. What we've got here is a rectangular hand-sunk shaft. Nowadays there are contractors that will come and drill a hole for you at $60 a metre. It's not cheap. However, to dig a hole like that, the old fellas have used a crowbar, pick, shovel, hammer and gads. Gads is a star chisel. You'll hit it with your hammer. Turn it, hit it, turn it. You can do a shot hole for explosives. Some of the old miners did use explosives up top in that hard, sharp, angular rock. It's called shin cracker, a well-earned name. And some of the other miners would use fencing wire. They'd bend it at a right angle. They could divide with those 2 pieces of wire. They could find a natural fracture in that rock. We call it a vertical. They'd follow the corner down. It gave them a good straight edge to follow. Gave them somewhere to break the rock into as well. Made it a lot easier. To get up and down the shaft in the early days, the old miners used to dig a hand and foot hole, alternately on each side of the shaft. And using those hand and foot holes, that's how they went up and down the shaft. Now I've tried that a couple of times in my younger days, and I wasn't keen on it. And there was a practical joker here in the very early days. If he knew his friends were downstairs mining, he'd leave a little surprise in the top hole. And as his friends climbed up, they'd put their hand in it. I won't tell you what it was, but it would give you the poops.
Oh.
Alright everyone, here we are in the opal dirt. You can see it's a different colour and texture to the sandstone up above where Ron's done the carvings. There's the bottom of the sandstone there. We use it as our roof. That clay was deposited around 120 odd million years ago. Lightning Ridge was at the edge of an inland sea, and what we're standing in were old riverbeds that ran into the sea. The water was fresh in nature at times due to the range of fossils we find. Whilst we dig through that clay looking for opal, occasionally we do find dinosaur bones, turtle shell, crocodile teeth, and the armoured scoop plates on the back of a croc. We find those here fossilised as well. Pine cones, seed pods, sticks, twigs, mussel shells, it goes on and on. I've found plenty of sticks and twigs the size of my fingers, but some friends of mine at a field called Jag Hill, 40 kilometres to the north, they found a 30-foot long tree laying in that clay. I've never seen or heard of another bit of wood that big being found. It wasn't opalised. If it was, the boys would have been multi-millionaires. It's just turned to stone. But they are going to bring a big chunk of it up and put it on display in the Opal and Fossil Centre when it's eventually built. Whilst we're on the fossil trail, some neat fossils have been found in the past. Out at the sheep yard, 60 kilometres to the west, there was one claim. They called it the bone claim. There are a lot of fossil there, and the Sydney Museum came up and did a lot of excavation work there. They found the lower jawbone from a little animal related to the platypus, and they call it a national treasure. They keep it under lock and key in the Sydney Museum, and apparently the man that found the fossils and donated them to the museum, he doesn't pay tax. That's his tax break. Eventually, when he comes up to the value of those fossils, he'll start paying tax again. It's not a bad lurk. We can all do it too, but you have to have something the museum wants, of course. Now, opal's formed in that clay in a hollow void. It's a water silica solution, and when it's first laid down, it's a little bit like jelly, and it does go hard under the pressure. Over the millions of years, that clay has expanded and contracted, and that does help to form the opal by pressure. To get your colour in the opal, there's a couple of theories there. One is, it's the stacking of the silica spheres in the opal, light going in and being refracted out like a diamond. The other is that there were microbes or enzymes in there, and they were eating something and passing something, doing something in there. And the other is that there was a small electrical current, and it's either lightning hitting the ground and going down a fault line, or it's a small electrical current that running water produces. When they come up with the 100% theory, that's the one I'll believe, and until then, I'll take a bit of all three. Alright, now we're lucky enough to have two forms of opal here at the Black Hand, knobbies and seam. Some fields only have knobbies and some only have seam. Knobbies are the nodules that appear in the clay, and they're totally unique to the ridge. Within a 50-kilometre radius, you get knobbies. Once you get out past that, no more knobbies. We don't know why, but we are glad it happens. They're totally unique to the ridge. Now we also get seam here, and seam is a flat sheet or a vein of opal that runs through the roof, or under the roof, or just in the level. There was a fair bit here, which is why the old miners have taken that dirt out, and there's still a little bit of it left behind. There's some grey potch over there on the roof. The black potch, they use that for the backing on doublets and triplets. There is a little bit of green in a piece over there next to the timber wedge, but it was too small. The old miners have left it, just like the little bit of orange above my head. Now fields like the Grawan, 60 kilometres to the west, they only have seam. There's a bit up here on the roof. In the past, that clay's opened up. The water silica solution has come in and filled that cracker void, and that little bit there originally did extend right across the roof in a flat sheet. They dig under that seam carefully out there. They throw the bottom dirt away. They bring the top stuff down, carefully sorting the opal out as they go. Occasionally they do miss a bit when they do it. Not many miners wash their dirt at Grawan, but if you're in knobby country, it pays to wash your dirt. Those knobbies can be very sporadic throughout the level, and they do vary in size. Anywhere from half the size of a pea, and we do call the little fellows pea knobbies, to as big as an emu egg. And there's a field out at the Cookerun called Emus 3, because apparently those knobbies were as big and as round as emu eggs. Some people did very well out of that. They had colour in theirs, but generally you're being teased. A lot of the time you'll find potch, opal with no colour or low grade colour most of the time. You can work 6, 8, even 12 months and not find anything or very little. You'll go downstairs one day sick of it and you'll say, I don't want to work that way anymore. Can we go that way for a change? And when you do change direction, the opal's been just in behind the wall the whole time. It's happened to me a couple of times, and the opposite has also happened. When I was about 15 or 16 years old, I worked on the western side of the hill. I was on the jackhammer and the opal was getting better and better. All of a sudden the jackhammer broke through. When we opened up, the old miners had come from the other direction, and of course for them, the colour got worse and worse. When we opened up, there was a 3-foot high drive by about 8 to 10 foot wide. Those old miners had beat us, they'd come from the other direction. We got a little bit, but nothing like those old fellas must have got. That's opal mining for you. Now, when we wash our dirt, we use an agitator. It's an old cement mixer, a ready-mix cement mixer that we use. We take the inspection plates off the side, bolt some mesh on the windows. You pump water in there whilst you feed your dirt in via a conveyor. Now that dirt will rub on itself, it'll turn to a slurry and run out of the mesh windows into a silt tank. You might put 15 or 20 loads in there for the week, and when you tail that agitator out, you might get 5 or 6 wheelbarrows back. It wears down considerably. And with a bit of luck, you might have some opal in it. But a lot of the time, you just do it for work experience. My friend used to say, why do we have to be so experienced? Now these props, a lot of us call them sticks. They're a white cypress pine tree that grow around the area. They'll take a bit of weight, anywhere up to 18 tonne each. I've had a work practice, if I opened up any more than 6 to 8 feet, I'd start putting the timber in. The roof can be soft in places, and there are faults that go all the way to the surface, all the way down to the artesian basin as well. There are a thing here that we call a blow, and it is from water being forced from below up through the opal dirt. It'll soften the roof and sometimes take the opal dirt up into the roof above you. Sometimes you don't even know it's up there. A couple of mates of mine worked at a field called Hatter's Flat. They had a cave in one day before they went to work. When they got to the bottom, that dirt on the floor was full of opal. I saw the opal, it was lovely. They had a big ice cream container, it was half full. Every stone in there was a gem. Every stone was 20 and 50 cent piece in size. I said, Jim, mate, it's lovely, but take it away, you're making me jealous. A lot of us like to see good opal, but we always wish it was ours. And there was a fellow here, old Drisey. If you put a nice opal in his hand, he'd say, I wish that was mine, and I wish you had one better. Lovely old fella. Now you can see by the floor, it's fairly damp and sticky. Nobody lives underground here at the ridge. If they tell you we do, set them straight. If you tried to sleep down here, your bedding would go mouldy, you'd breathe in too much moisture. It'd be too detrimental to your health. Nice place to have lunch in the middle of summer, but you wouldn't want to try and sleep here. Now claims here are 50 metres by 50 metres square. You can have 2 claims in your name. If you're lucky enough to have a company in your name, the company can have 2 claims as well. Some miners form a company to get the extra 2 claims. Now, to register a claim, you have to have done a mine manager's course, that's $110. To work a claim, you have to do a mining awareness course, that's another $110. There's an environmental impact study course that you have to do as well. Now, there's $1,000 to register a claim. There's a $700 bond. It's a once-off payment. On the new fields, when you're finished, you must backfill the shaft, clean up the mess on the surface. It's inspected. If it's all right, you'll get your $700 back. If not, they put you in a blacklist book and charge you twice as much next time. You must look after your name. There's also a $300 registration fee. That registration fee, you pay it once a year, every year, same time of the year, like your car rego. Some of the numbers on the map have got a line through them. The miner has cancelled that claim. He's backfilled and rehabilitated. Anybody can repeg, survey and register those, and a couple of the others there have a circle. They've lapsed. The miner has forgotten to pay his $300 for the year. Again, anybody can repeg and register those. When you go back upstairs opposite the showcase, there's a picture of a young man with a huge opal in his hands. That piece was valued at over $1 million worth. Him and his brother went to America, and while they were away, they both forgot to renew their claim. One of the local miners got an updated version of the map, saw the circle. He raced out with his 4 pegs, put them in the ground, paid his fee. He was the legal owner. The brothers were ropeable when they came back from the States. Nothing they could do. Now, I know the men that re-registered their claim. The first thing they did when they went to work there was clean up the loose dirt like you see down here. They showed me some of the opal. Some of it was valued at $22,000, $18,000, $12,000. The brothers had spoilt themselves rotten by leaving that loose dirt behind. I've always had a work policy not to leave any dirt behind. There's always a chance of opal being in it, and you don't leave any behind, especially if you're on opal. You're asking to leave it behind. Now, you get your leases here, and they vary in size. The lease will last for 30 days when you get it. In that 30 days, you take a prospect drill out, generally 9-inch diameter. You pepper the ground. You try and get as many holes down as possible in the 30 days. After the 30 days, there's a grace period where you can register claims, other people as well. Then that lease will be up for grabs again. A 9-inch hole is a little look in a lot of dirt. Out at the cook room once, we drilled a 9-inch hole through the roof and into the opal dirt. It brought nothing up. We tunnelled over to that 9-inch hole for an air connection one day, 2 inches away, gem quality opal. You've got to be lucky to find it with a 9-inch. Individual knobbies are a lot harder to find than seen. There's a field out at the Cookham, a multi-million-dollar field. That lease was drilled over. The fellows that drilled there the first time just didn't go deep enough. The second fellows went a little bit deeper, and up came the opal, and that field made a lot of men wealthy. I believe the fellows that drilled there the first time, they would have been kicking themselves in the pants. I'm pretty sure I would have been. Now you can see the roof here is fairly clean where the levels come away. At 2 places I know of, one at the 6, one at the 10 mile. They had these odd looking lumps sticking down. They wondered what they were. They were dinosaur footprints. The clay was hard enough for the dinosaur to walk on. He's pressed it down. The sandstones come in later on and filled his footprints, and that's what they could see from underground. Out at the 10 mile, those dinosaurs were swimming through the water. Every now and then, their feet touched the bottom. They were leaving elliptical footprints in the sandstone. And I think they were either migrating or a family group, because some of the tracks varied in size. What a lot of modern miners tend to do now, though, is take a foot or 2 foot of sandstone with them as they're working. It washes a lot quicker than the dirt at our feet. They could be digging footprints down, not seeing them, and half of them probably don't know what they're looking at. Pretty neat. Now here's an old miner's tunnel. There's his floor. That's his workspace, crawling in and out of there on his hands and knees. Now the old miners believed there was no opal in the floor, which is why they left that there, and the old fellas were wrong. Sometimes you get lovely opal in the floor. Some of the best I've found was down around my ankle height out at the cook room. Makes me wonder how much opal the old miners crawled over in the past by leaving that dirt behind. To get their dirt from here to the other end, the old fellas would get a dried out old sheepskin or bullock skin. They'd stitch a bucket together and drag that dirt along the floor. I have seen little wooden trolleys, but they do rot away down. Alright everybody, what we've got here is some stow dirt. It's called stow dirt because it's backstowing an old tunnel. You can see that tunnel goes over the back. The old miners did that for 2 reasons. The first, they didn't have to wind that dirt to the surface by hand with a windlass. Save a lot of work. The second, if they pushed enough in there and tight enough against the roof, they could possibly stop people coming in from the surrounding claims at night, trying to pinch their opal. The early miners called them ratters. Ratting still goes on today. Nowadays though, some of them wear military night vision goggles so they can see around the surface at night. They also work in teams at times. They might have a man or two downstairs ratting and somebody up top is cockatoo or watchdog. If they hear a car or see a car coming, he'll warn his mates down the hole in some way and they'll scatter. My father was being ratted in the early days and what they were doing, they were digging the dirt down from their side. They'd get into his claim and rat him. So what he did, he got a heap of old light bulbs and smashed them on his side. He went to the pub one day for a beer and there's a fellow standing at the bar with band-aids all over his fingers. He went up to him and said, "You won't do that again, will you?" And he was never ratted again. My friends were being ratted regularly, only when they were on Opal. They wondered how the ratter knew. They went out to their claim one rainy evening and they caught the ratter. It turned out to be one of their workmates. They dropped the young fellow off after work. He'd wait for them to leave. He'd jump on his trail bike, ride back out and help himself. The other young fellow was a local lad, born and bred here. He should have known better. He ended up in the courthouse. Only when he went, there were 40 or 50 irate miners waiting for him out the front. I was there that day and I saw it all happen. The police put their head out the front door. They noticed the angry crowd. They sent the young bloke out the back door when he finished. The courthouse is as big as this ballroom. Everybody knew he went out the back door. He walked down the footpath towards the bowling club. So did the crowd. They gave that young fellow a fair hammering as they walked down the footpath. That young bloke left town that night. I haven't seen him since. And I'm not sure if he even came back for his second court appearance. In the early days, if there was a dispute between miners, somebody would have got on top of one of those white mullock heaps with a bell and rung it and called miners' court. Anybody hearing the bell or the call could go down. Both parties would have presented their case and any miners that turned up would have been judge and jury. Whatever they said was upheld. Nowadays it's off to court. Criminals have rights probably more than the poor old victim. Yeah. Now when we mine, there are a couple of ways of mining. Some guys use jackhammers, some have got underground diggers, and there's a couple of ways to get your dirt upstairs. You've got your automatic hoist, and the first one was designed by a fellow who suffered from childhood polio. He had nobody to work with him. He made an automatic hoist. When all the other miners saw it in action, they thought, hey, that's a good idea, I want one. He should have taken a patent out on that. Now there are blowers as well, and they're a machine that sucks the dirt from underground. There's a 10-inch PVC pipe, and any rock that fits in that pipe will get sucked up like nobody's business. It fills a hopper upstairs. Once there's a certain amount of weight in there, it'll cut the revs on your engine, the door will open, the dirt will fall in your truck, the suction will pull that door shut, and away you go again. It's a good way to get your dirt upstairs, but you've got a truck engine running at 1800 RPM upstairs, and it uses a fair bit of diesel. We did have a saying, when you're on Opal, fuel is nothing. When you're not on Opal, fuel is everything. Now they also have boggers underground. They're an electric, over-hydraulic little muck cart, and you ram a bucket into the dirt. It'll tip up and tip the dirt into a tipping body. You'll put 5 or 6 of those in there, drive it back to the hoist, reverse it back, tip the dirt in the bucket, and away you go again. They're a good way to get your dirt up as well. Now, most of the mining terminology we have, it's very old. A lot stems from just before and just after World War I. The old diggers had dug a room out like this that said there's enough room here to have a ballroom dance. They've called it a ballroom, and we still call it that today. Now the naming of opal fields, they're usually named after people that have found opal or trace, their last name or their nickname if they've got one, and sometimes people don't want a field named after them. It hasn't been proven yet. Nobody wants a duffer in their name. There's a field out the road called Lemonade because it was a total fizzer. No one found any money there. A couple of 100 metres away they drilled a bit of opal up on Anzac Day and they called it Anzacs. Good on the boys for doing it. There are some odd names. There's Chocolates and Roses, Green Acres, Granny's Flat, T-Bone. There's even a field called Krusty's because the fella looked like Krusty the Clown from The Simpsons. He wasn't keen on the name, but the name stuck, and that's what it's called at the mines department. Now, being 102 years old, you can probably go half a kilometre down the hill via some of the tunnels if you knew where you were going. You want to know where you're going underground. It is easy to get lost. And to work out where you are in your claim, it's not rocket science, but people do get it wrong, especially if they're on opal. They do find it hard to stop on their boundary. You've generally got an open 3-foot shaft. You drop your string and plumb bob down that shaft. You stand under it, you take your compass, take your readings and measurements, go back up top, redo your survey, and you know where you are in relation to your boundary. Now you sometimes get a run underground where you can follow the opal. The longest run I've ever had was about 35 or 40 metres in length, and it was on the boundary of 2 claims. I teamed up with the neighbour, I knew him fairly well. We took a metre of his, a metre of mine. We worked the boundary out together. The opal was pooled, sold and divided. There were no arguments on going over the boundary. Now if you go into the neighbour's claim without permission, you can be charged with illegal mining. And we were once, we ended up in court out at Emus 3. The boss came downstairs one day, got on the digger, and quite by accident, he went into the neighbour's claim. He didn't go far, only 1.5 metres in by about 1.5 metres wide. 3 months later, we got a summons to go to court. The lady that owned the claim next to us wanted compensation. She wanted $10,000 from each miner. There were 4 of us involved. We got a camera, went back out to the claim. When we got down there, that 1.5 metre square hole had turned into a 2.5 metre square hole. She sent her sons down with a jackhammer to make the hole bigger to make us look worse in court. The trouble with that, jackhammers leave holes in the wall like those over there. And the digger will leave big scratch marks down the face from the teeth. We took pictures of both, showed the magistrate. He knew straight away what the lady was trying to do, and he threw it out of court. And he did order her to pay our court costs. And it wasn't cheap. Each of us was supposed to pay our solicitor $1,800, so it backfired dramatically. The digger's rest hadn't burnt down. I don't drink. I walked straight across the road that day and bought myself a bourbon. I thought having a drink that day was way better than giving the lady $10,000. And after the court case, she came up to us and said, "Do you remember those cupcakes I gave you that day?" "Yes." She said, "I should have put some cyanide on them." Now, when the old miners had a gouge in the past, they'd blow their candle out and gouge in the dark to conserve their candles. You're down about 19 or 20 metres now. You would not see the hand in front of your face. Just listen to the sound of the pick in the clay. Every now and then in the darkness, the old miners might have hit a stone. Different sound altogether. The old miners would have heard the clink. They would have lit their candle again. If it was red, they would have gouged it out and put it in their pocket or tobacco pouch. In the very early days, if it was blue-green, over the shoulder. They couldn't sell blue-green opal in the early days. We can sell everything today. Just a matter of time. Now when I gouge, I've usually got 2 chisel edges on my pick. I don't have a pointy side. If you hit an opal with the chiseled edge, it'll break it in 2 or 3 pieces. You'd rather pieces than hitting it with the pointy end and shattering it like glass. And if it's got colour in it, I call that coloured sugar. And I've made some serious coloured sugar. Out at Dooley's once, I hit a piece with a jackhammer. The 3 of us underground reckon I smashed a stone worth about $120,000 worth. The workplace went green, orange, red. We sat back for 20 minutes in disgust. None of us had a camera. And one of the men with me said, "Peter, you're banned from the jackhammer for the rest of the day. Don't touch it." And I am being polite. 3 men underground, you can imagine the language and the name calling. I'm used to being called names. It would have been the best stone I would ever have found and sold. I'm not alone in breaking the best stone. Lots of us have done it over the years. Now, I've found some lovely opal over the years. I found opal where I couldn't sleep for days. The adrenaline was so high. I'd shut my eyes and try and sleep, and all I could see were colours and dollar signs rolling around. I guarantee I've walked away from more opal than I've ever got, and a good example of that is out at Jag Hill. I'd be in the passenger seat going to work, and I'd say to my partner, "Ian, it looks good in amongst the big box trees over there." "Yes, it does," he'd say. We didn't do anything, and about a week and a half went by, and sure enough, one morning, there's a 3-foot diameter drill going down in the same place. When they got to the bottom and they belled the hole out, they only took 4 truckloads out from under that hole and got $800,000. I had to say it to Ian, "I told you it looked good in amongst the big box trees." Those big box trees, they could be anywhere around 800 or 900 years old here, and the roots have gone all the way down a fault line to the opal dirt looking for moisture. It's a good indicator, but like I said before, not every fault line produces. Now out at the Cookeran, there's a field called Allars. Millions of years ago, the ground slipped. It created a Z fault and changed the height in the roof out there by 3 to 4 metres from one side to the other. It also ran for about 9 or 10 claims in length. Everybody along it found a little bit or a lot of opal. Those that were off to the side, a little bit or none. I worked off to the side for a while and we got about 25 or 30,000 out of the claim we were in. The miners that were right next to us, they got 12 million. They had the major fault line, we didn't. Not every fault line produces opal, but they are a good indicator. Now the boys that got the 12 million next to me, I know them fairly well. One of them said they couldn't put a jackhammer in the wall without breaking opal. There was that much there. He said they were making roughly $100,000 a truckload for 10 weeks straight. And they were doing 2 and 3 truckloads a day sometimes. Down at the information centre there's a fossicking pile there. A lady had a look a couple of years ago and she found an opal that paid for her holidays and then some. And that was opal donated, that was dirt donated by opal miners. So I reckon that fellow was spewing when he realised she'd found a good stone out of it. Now when I was a kid, we used to come out here to the 3 Mile and one day I was still sitting in the back of the little V-dub buggy and hey, there's an opal on the ground. I hadn't even got out of the car. You used to be able to pick a lot of opal up down here. In the early days, there was something like 800 miners working this one field alone. Apparently at night, it looked like stars in the sky. There were that many little campfires on the way down the hill. Very popular little area. The first opal that was found here at the 3 Mile was found by a couple of miners walking home from work. They were working over at the 4 Mile and they lived down where the opal caravan park is now. They were cutting through the bush and picked a bit of opal up down the bottom of the hill and that kicked the 3 Mile off.
Welcome to the Chambers of the Black Hand. My name's Felix Monk. I've been mining in Lightning Ridge since 1968. I was born in Switzerland. I came to Australia in 1966 on the Himalaya. I worked in Sydney as a toolmaker for 2 years and I knew somebody in Lightning Ridge who was mining, so I decided to go up there for 2 or 3 months. And while I was up there, I found a bit of opal and then I found my wife. And now we're married 44 years. I known Ron Canlon, the artist of course, for the last, well over 30 years. I can say first off, he's a really nice bloke. He's a great artist, he's self-taught, and I'm just jealous because he got more talent than any one person should have. As you can see on my hard hat, I had a major dispute with one of my working mates, and Ron said, look, being a manly supporter, just throw your hard hat in the back of my ute and I'll bring it back out tomorrow, which he did. And as you can see, he hand painted it, and now all the blokes with their imitation rabbits are spewing, and I love it.
I don't know how the rabbitoes got up there right at the top. It was done quite a while ago, so it must be psychic.
This is where Ron started, right here. Ron's a self-taught artist. He never had a lesson in his life. He did it strictly as a hobby for the first 8 or 9 years. He used to go down the mine, do a bit of digging. If he got bored or couldn't get a trace, he used to come up here and do a bit of carving. This is a 45-foot level. There's no opal here. There wasn't a couple of small places, not here. But everybody who had a claim in the area wanted to make sure there was no opal, including Ron. So this is where he started, okay? Right, so there you go. This is how far Ron, yeah, you're right, you can stand anywhere here. This is how far Ron got in about 8 years. And I've got to say it again, strictly as a hobby. But then he got together with Trevor, that's the bloke in the shop with the beard. And he's seen it. And Trevor is an opal miner businessman from Lightning Ridge. And he said, Ron, we could make something of it. And Ron was sort of hum and hawing about it. He said, oh, I don't know if people want to see what I'm doing. And Trevor said, leave it up to me. So Trevor put in the showroom, put in the lift, put in a big generator, put in lights. And of course, Ron had a lot more time then. And he did all that in there in the last 9 years or so. So there's all up over 700 carvings. A lot of them are on your DVD. A few on the left, if you go in there where the Aboriginal room is, you keep going, and at at the very end of it is a Lion of Lucerne, a very famous monument in Switzerland. That's actually the Lion of Lucerne. Der Löwe von Luzern. Okay? Because I was born in Switzerland. This is why I'm not a local yet. I've got about 15 years to go if I live long enough. When I first come here, we were still sinking shafts like these by hand, of course, exactly the same as the old timers. 2 blokes be working 6 days a week, 3 weeks at least, to get down here to 50 foot. It's hard work, it's dirty work. Our safety equipment used to be a floppy hat and songs. How H&S would have a field day today, right? You had to get through the shin cracker up top, the hardest layer. Once you get in the sandstone, it gets a bit easier. We used to just sit in the shaft like that. Once we got through the hardest layer up top, where we probably had to blast, we used to sit in the shaft like that with a big heavy sinking pick, and we'd be digging like that. And when we got enough dirt there, you would have a bucket hanging on the hook of your windlass. Got a little short handled shovel because you can't turn around in the shaft. So you fill the bucket like that, and the bucket's full. You just give it a pull on the rod and you might wind it up. That's how we sank the shafts. The old timers wouldn't have had ladders to get as steep as that. So the old timers used to cut steps in the side of the shaft, and they used to climb up and down in the steps like that. So there you go. That's how we got the shafts down till early 70s, when the first Cornwell drill came to Lightning Ridge. And he drilled you a 3-foot hole. And we didn't think he's going to get through the shin cracker up top. So we all went and had a look and watched him, and he started drilling. And we thought all of a sudden he'll have no teeth left on that bucket. But all of a sudden it bit, and he went straight through that shin cracker. Last time I sank a hole by hand. Yeah. We're now 65 foot on the ground, and when you sink the shaft down to that depth, all of a sudden you will break through the sandstone, and then you hit the level. This is called the level here. Now the level itself is a sediment of an old inland sea, and we got to go back 110 million years. We got to go back to the time where Australia just started to drift away from Asia. These inland seas dried out, and over millions and millions of years, sandstone started to build up over the top. Millions of years on, water started to leach silica out of the sandstone. And millions of years on, that silica eventually penetrated the clay as near pure silica jelly, and started to fill in cracks, crevices and hollows. And millions of years on, it started to solidify and eventually turn into opal. Now that's a very simple explanation, but it's about the steps it took to make a little bit of opal. Now there's one more important part. Opal's 97% silica and about 3% impurities. The most important impurity you need to have between about 0.2 and 0.5 of 1% water content. Without the water content, it's just common opal called potch. It can be black, grey, semi-black, whatever, but no colour. It's only that minute percentage of water content in the form of water molecules, of course, that create the colour. It gets a bit complicated, but I'll try to explain. If you can imagine a molecular structure of the silica is sort of fairly webby, and these water molecules, they sit in there in bundles. Now, when the light hits it, instead of reflecting it back as a mirror would, when the light hits it, the light crisscrosses inside them water molecules and reflects the light back in the rainbow colours. That's where the colour comes from. Of course, it's more complicated than that, because you can get a cheap blue stone against a $200,000 gem, but it's still the basics of it. Now, often the tall people complain. Yeah, they say, oh, the miner's that short. I say, no, you're not supposed to stand up. You're supposed to bend over and work, aren't you? Of course, the miners for years been using pick, shovel, canes and so on. Already in the late 60s, when I come to the region, a few of the miners were experimenting, extracting the opal in a different way. And there's a very good reason for it. Unlike Manuka with peely riflets, even shipyards, little garage glass, they've got sea mold. Yes, because of the sea mold.
You do what you got to do.
They can come in here, there and everywhere, and they're a little bit harder to find. And what the miners do,
Kevin Rudd is cutting Julia's throat. Julia is stabbing Ruddy in the throat, but Bob Brown the greenie has Julia on a leash. Now when they swap jobs, there's a bit of paper over her face. When I came down, it said, out of order.
Oh, cute. Extend.
It only ever fills every 8 to 10 years in flood water. Yeah. So any other time it's sunflower, wheat, and old, whatever they put in there. When she's full of flood water, 9 miles long, 4 miles wide, 15 foot up there.